If you're watching this, you're 100% a horror fanatic and we approve. Let us know where you are watching this from and be a part of our community. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything. Let's start. A couple of years back, when I was 25, I shared an apartment with one of my closest friends. Unfortunately, as time passed, our friendship started to fizzle out, mostly because she was barely ever home. But on this particular night, she happened to be staying over. She went to bed early, and as usual, I stayed up. Thanks to my work schedule, I was pretty much a night owl by default. My late-night routine always looked the same. Lounging on the couch, watching YouTube videos, just unwinding. Started out as a typical night, until something happened that I'll never forget. My neighbors actually tried to lure me outside and kidnap me. Before I get into that, let me explain the living situation. The house we rented had 3 bedrooms, and 2 of them, along with the kitchen, faced the house next door. Our neighbors were a young couple living in this small, run-down mill house directly across from us. They were odd, to say the least. At first, I didn't think much of their weird behavior. I like being neighborly, but they constantly showed up at our door asking for the strangest things. One day, they knocked just to ask if we could fill an old Mountain Dew bottle with water because their utilities got shut off. Another time, they wanted to borrow beer. And once, they literally asked if we could spare a single dollar. It was harmless at first, just strange. But it got uncomfortable when they started lurking around more. Sometimes, I'd catch them crouched by our porch, grabbing leftover cigarette butts from the ashtray. Other times, I'd spot their faces pressed right up against the door peephole, trying to see if we were home. Fast forward to that night. I was sitting on the couch, half watching YouTube, when I heard a knock at the door. I already knew who it was. I rolled my eyes and walked over to peek through the little window in the door. Sure enough, it was the boyfriend from next door, standing on the porch. Normally, I would have ignored it and gone back to my videos. But this time, he looked different. He seemed nervous, a little jumpy, like something was off. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open. "Hey, I need a favor," he started, shifting from foot to foot. "I've got this ring in my pocket for my girlfriend. I want to propose tonight. Can you come to the backyard and record it for me?" I blinked, caught off guard. Of all the things I expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. Still, I was curious, and I congratulated him, saying I'd be there in a minute. I just needed to grab my shoes. The moment I shut and locked the door, a bad feeling settled in my stomach. Instead of putting on my shoes, I headed straight to the back room that had a view of their yard. I carefully pulled the blinds aside, expecting to see maybe some string lights, flowers, or a little setup for a proposal. But the backyard? Completely dark. No decorations. No signs of a romantic surprise. Just darkness. My heart skipped. Something wasn't right. Without wasting time, I went and woke my roommate. I shook her awake, whispering everything that had just happened. Her eyes widened immediately. "Absolutely not," she said, fully alert now. Before we could figure out our next move, there was another knock at the door. More aggressive this time. We froze. I crept back to the door and peeked through the little window. The porch was dark, but I could make out the outline of his face. His eye pressed right up against the peephole, trying to see inside. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I quietly backed away, pressing my back against the door, panic settling in. My roommate emerged from her room, gripping 2 wire hangers like makeshift weapons. We sat on the floor, clutching the hangers, listening for movement, hearts racing, until finally he left. But we weren't ready to relax just yet. We decided to sneak out through the back door, hop in her car, and drive around to see what was going on. Their house always had the front door wide open, No curtains, no blinds, so you could easily see inside. We drove by slowly, peering into the living room. There they were, the couple, along with an older man I'd never seen before. All just sitting silently on the couch, staring at the wall. Blank expressions, totally motionless. It was the creepiest thing I've ever seen. We didn't stick around. We drove straight to a friend's place and stayed the night there. After that, I stopped answering the door anytime they came knocking. Weeks passed, and then one evening, I pulled into the driveway after work and noticed an older woman parked outside their house. As I got out of my car, she approached me, asking if I'd seen the couple recently. I told her I hadn't seen them for a while. That's when she explained that she was the owner of the house, and they were her tenants. Apparently, they hadn't paid rent for months, and she'd finally been forced to evict them. When she went inside the house that day, what she found was disgusting. The place was destroyed, garbage everywhere, holes punched through the walls, even drug paraphernalia and needles scattered across the floor. I told her how sorry I was that she had to deal with all that, but deep down, I was just relieved they were finally gone. And thinking back to that night, standing on the porch, asking me to follow him into that dark backyard, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had been naive enough to go. Whatever they had planned, I'm glad I never found out. Two years ago, when I was 34, it was my turn to take the kids out for Halloween. My wife and I switch off every year. Last year was her turn, so this one was mine. Our son was 6 and our daughter was 8 at the time. They were beyond excited, decked out in their costumes, practically bouncing off the walls with energy. We live in a quiet neighborhood, nothing too big, but Halloween always brings people out. Decorated houses, spooky music, kids running everywhere. It's the perfect little Halloween spot. My usual Halloween routine is pretty simple. I stay on the sidewalk, keeping a watchful eye, while the kids run from door to door collecting candy. That night started out no different. After about half an hour of walking the neighborhood, we ended up on one of the busiest streets, the real jackpot for candy. Nearly every house had decorations, some of them pretty elaborate. Glowing skeletons, fake graveyards, fog machines. I was a little distracted, admiring the setups, when I realized my kids were walking back toward me, and they weren't alone. With them was another child, or at least that's what I thought at first. She looked about the same height as my daughter, but something was off. The girl was wearing a strange, homemade mask. Looked like it was made out of cardboard or thick paper, and it covered most of her face. It wasn't like the cute store-bought masks the other kids had. This one was rough, like she'd thrown it together last minute. My daughter asked if her new friend could tag along for trick-or-treating. I didn't think much of it at the time. Figured it was a classmate or maybe a kid from the neighborhood I hadn't met yet, so I said sure. As we continued walking, I started noticing a tall man following a short distance behind us. He was big, broad shoulders, towering over most of the crowd, and he gave me this uneasy feeling right away. I couldn't tell if he was just another parent or if there was something else going on. What made it worse was his mask. An oversized, angry-looking cat mask that completely covered his face. The design of it was unsettling, and the way he stared at me through it, it gave me chills. I assumed he was the girl's dad, so I tried to make small talk to ease my nerves. Nice weather tonight, huh? I said. Nothing. He didn't reply. He just stood there silently, staring through the mask. Cleared my throat, trying again. Is that your daughter? This time he nodded once but still didn't say a word. His whole presence felt off. The silence, the stiff body language, the weird mask. But I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just the quiet, awkward type. We kept walking, the kids running up to porches, collecting candy, laughing. But I couldn't shake the strange feeling that settled over me. About 15 minutes later, both of my kids came running back and told me they wanted to head home. That surprised me. Usually they never want to leave before their candy bags are at least half full. But this time, their bags were barely a third filled. I didn't push them. "All right," I said. "Let's call it a night." We waved goodbye to the tall man and the masked girl and started walking home. But as I glanced back one last time, I noticed something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. They weren't leaving. They were just standing there. Both of them frozen in place, staring at us as we walked away. They didn't move a muscle. Even as we turned the corner, I checked again. They were still there, still staring. At this point, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling anymore. As we walked, I asked my kids, "So, who was that girl? Do you know her from school or something?" My daughter looked up at me, confused. "She's your friend," she replied, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That stopped me in my tracks. "What do you mean, my friend?" Turns out, the girl with the cardboard mask had approached my kids earlier. She told them she was a friend of mine, that she wanted to join us for trick-or-treating, but she was too shy to ask me herself. So she asked my daughter to do it for her. But here's the thing, I didn't know her. I didn't know any kids around that age. Certainly none that would be hanging around the neighborhood on Halloween claiming to be my friend. What my daughter told me next made my stomach twist. When the girl first came up to them, she wasn't wearing the mask. They saw her face, and she wasn't a child at all. She was an older woman, roughly my age, with visible wrinkles and an adult face. But she had disguised herself as a kid, put on that crude homemade mask, and somehow convinced my children she knew me. To make matters worse, they admitted that while we walked, she had been quietly taking candy from their bags when I wasn't looking. That's why they wanted to go home. They noticed her stealing their treats, and it made them uncomfortable. We got home, and I explained everything to my wife. We emptied their candy bags and carefully checked every piece, just to be safe, but thankfully, nothing seemed tampered with. We didn't call the police. After all, technically nothing serious had happened. But looking back now, I regret not reporting it. It's unsettling to think there are adults out there on Halloween, hiding behind masks, pretending to be kids, with who knows what kind of intentions. It still gives me chills thinking about what could have happened. If I hadn't paid attention, or if my kids hadn't spoken up when they did. I'm a 24-year-old international student currently doing my graduate studies in Berlin. I live alone in a small apartment that's part of a student-only housing complex. The area is generally peaceful, the usual distant hum of trams passing by, the occasional muffled music drifting from other student apartments, but nothing ever feels unsafe. Our building has decent security too. You need a key to unlock the front entrance, and another key to get through the door to each floor's hallway. So basically, unless you live here or someone lets you in, you can't even reach the apartment doors. If someone wants to visit, they either have to buzz you or call you so you can let them in. Because of that, I've always felt pretty secure here. If there's ever a knock at my door, it's usually a neighbor, the landlord, or sometimes one of my friends dropping by. No big deal. But one night, something felt off. It was around 10 p.m. I had just finished a long assignment and was unwinding with some music when I heard a knock at my door. At first, I didn't think much of it. But for some reason, this time, a weird feeling crept over me. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't full-blown panic, but there was this uneasy, gut-level sense that something wasn't right. So I stayed quiet, hoping whoever it was would get tired and leave. But the knocking didn't stop, kept going, and going for a solid 30 seconds. Finally, I spoke up through the door. "Hello!" A deep voice answered in English, not German, which most people here speak, especially in the building. The voice said, "It's your food delivery, Uber Eats." That immediately made me pause. First of all, I hadn't ordered anything. Second, I recognized most of the people on my floor, and that definitely wasn't a neighbor's voice. It was deep, raspy, the kind of voice you'd expect from someone older, maybe in their 40s, and it had that rough, smoker's edge to it. It didn't sound like a friendly delivery guy. I told him, "I didn't order anything. You've got the wrong door." But instead of leaving, the knocking got more aggressive. The same voice insisted, "No, I'm sure you did. I have an order under your name." That's when my nerves turned into full-on alarm bells. I quickly looked around the apartment, grabbed the closest thing I could use as a weapon, a metal umbrella that happened to be leaning near the door. My heart dropped when I realized the door wasn't locked. But thankfully, even though the lock wasn't engaged, the design of the door meant you still couldn't open it from the outside without a key. Still, being that close, maybe just 10 centimeters of wood separating me from whoever was out there, made my skin crawl. I steadied my voice and asked, "Okay, what's the name on the order?" For a second, there was silence. Then, as if he was stalling to come up with an answer, I heard a frustrated sigh followed by another loud bang on the door. This one harder, angrier. It was clear by now this wasn't a delivery guy. After a few tense seconds, I heard hurried footsteps heading down the emergency staircase that runs next to my apartment. The sound of those quick, heavy steps made it clear. Whoever it was, they were in a rush to get away. I stood there for a while, clutching the umbrella, listening, heart racing. I couldn't figure out how he'd even gotten inside the building to begin with. You need a key for both the main entrance and the hallway. Had someone accidentally let him in? Had he slipped in behind someone? The thought chilled me. I opened my building's student WhatsApp group and posted a message, asking if anyone had noticed anything strange or let someone in earlier. But no one had seen or heard anything. No one had opened the door for anyone that night. In the end, I locked my door properly, double-checked the windows, and sat there for a long time thinking about how lucky I was to have trusted my instincts. To this day, I don't know what that man's real intentions were, but I'm glad I never opened the door to find out. When I was 23, I moved in with my cousin in this old house tucked deep in the woods. It was in a tiny rural area outside a town called Clay Creek, way out in the Tennessee backcountry. You've probably never heard of it, most people haven't, but to give you an idea, you can drive through the whole place in about 2 minutes flat. A handful of farms, a gas station at a split in the road, and more trees than people. That's about it. The nearest real city was over 40 minutes away, so you learn to get comfortable with the quiet. Or at least you try to. My cousin and I moved in together in late October, just before Halloween that year. Sometimes we'd have friends over, but mostly it was just the two of us, working during the day, gaming, or watching movies at night. The house was originally built by the folks who lived there before us, and they let us rent it dirt cheap, only enough to cover their yearly property taxes. It wasn't huge, but it was cozy. 3 bedrooms, the main one downstairs near the living room, a little back room that used to be a porch before they walled it in, and an upstairs loft where I slept. The whole place was pretty open, with the kitchen and living area on one side, and the bedrooms and bathroom on the other. Our living room was our main hangout spot. We had all our gaming consoles set up, the TV mounted on a wall that avoided the window glare. It was our routine eat, game, relax. One of my regular chores was taking the kitchen scraps out to the edge of the woods. There was a little clearing about half a football field away from the front porch where we tossed the food scraps. It kept the animals happy and the trash indoors cleaner. I did it almost daily, and it saved me from dish duty most nights. The woods were full of critters. Raccoons, deer, possums, rabbits, and occasionally, foxes or coyotes. The coyotes spooked me a bit at first, especially when their eyes caught the moonlight or I heard them sniffing around in the dark. But over time, I got used to it. They knew the drill. I'd leave the scraps, they'd wait until I was gone, and then it was their buffet. But around September of the following year, something different started showing up. It was late, and like usual, I carried the scraps out. But that night, it was dead quiet. No coyotes yipping, no rustling in the brush. Just an eerie stillness that made the hair on my arms stand up. I figured it was the cooler weather keeping the animals away, until I dumped the food and heard it. A low, deep growl, so deep I could feel it in my chest. I froze for a second, then carefully backed away, my eyes scanning the tree line. That's when I saw them, eyes, glowing faint yellow in the darkness, fixed right on me. They were larger than any animal I'd seen out there. Bigger than a coyote, bigger than a dog. Keeping my gaze locked on those eyes, I slowly made my way back to the house. Inside, I told my cousin, "There's something big out there tonight." We decided to keep the porch light on, just in case whatever it was got curious. The rest of the night was uneventful. But from then on, every time I took scraps out, it was there. I never saw its full body, just the eyes, glowing from the woods, and always that low growl when I approached. It gave me chills every time. After about a month, it stopped growling. But the eyes? They were still there, watching me from the shadows. Winter rolled around. Snow blanketed everything, and the cold kept most of the usual critters hidden. But not that thing. I still tossed scraps its way, even on Christmas Eve. Then we left for about a week to visit family for the holidays. When we got back, the fridge was stocked with leftover food, and the house was freezing from being empty so long. We unloaded everything and settled in. My cousin passed out on the couch, and I headed upstairs to my loft. In the middle of the night, I woke up thirsty. Quietly, I made my way downstairs for water. That's when I heard it, faint thumping from outside. I glanced at the porch through the large glass doors, expecting to see raccoons or maybe some stray animal. But the porch was empty. Still, that weird feeling crept over me again. I shrugged it off, went to the kitchen, but kept an eye on the glass doors in the living room. And then I saw it. A massive head, like a wolf or dog, poked around the edge of the door, sniffing the glass. But it wasn't like any dog I'd seen before. This thing's head was huge, far bigger than any coyote or stray. I froze, heart pounding. But then I remembered the creature that had been lingering in the woods for months. Maybe it was hungry, I thought. After all, I'd been gone for a week. I opened the fridge, grabbed some leftover turkey, figuring I'd toss it onto the porch. But when I turned back toward the glass doors, my breath caught in my throat. The creature wasn't hunched down sniffing anymore. It was standing, on two legs. It was towering over me, easily over 7 feet tall, its head bent down to peer inside through the door. I'm over 6 feet tall myself, and my cousin's 6 feet 4 inches. This thing dwarfed us both. Panic hit me like a freight train. But worse still, it reached for the door handle. The sliding glass door rattled as it pulled, the locked frame clanking against the force. Right then, my cousin stirred on the couch. Still groggy, he started walking toward the bathroom, until he saw me, standing frozen in the kitchen, eyes locked on the door. He opened his mouth to speak, but then he noticed the shadowy figure looming outside. The creature turned its head toward him and growled. I glanced between them, my heart racing, then slowly stepped toward the kitchen door that led to the side porch. My cousin, still whispering, asked, "What are you doing?" Without replying, I yanked the door open, tossed the plate of turkey onto the porch, and slammed it shut. The creature's gaze snapped back to me. It saw the food hit the snow, let out a low grunt, and leaped off the porch to grab it. I barely locked the door before my cousin grabbed my arm and dragged me upstairs to the loft. We stayed there all night listening. We heard it come back, sniffing at the door, pacing the porch, scraping its claws gently across the window pane. Eventually, it vanished into the woods. The next morning, I took the scraps out, but I didn't dare go past the edge of the yard. Even though that thing never directly attacked us, the fear stayed with me. Sometimes at night, we still catch glimpses of it lingering near the tree line, especially by the spot where I tossed the scraps. We always turn off the lights, stay quiet, and watch, waiting for it to slink back into the forest. We don't know exactly what it is, but having something like that lurking in your backyard is equal parts terrifying and shocking. I was 16 when my family moved into a new house in a quiet little neighborhood. It was a big change for all of us, and as we were unpacking, I couldn't help but notice the neighbors peeking out from their windows and front yards, watching us settle in. My parents always told me to be polite, so I gave them a little wave, trying to be friendly. Most of them just waved back or smiled faintly, but one man in particular caught my attention. He looked like he was in his early 30s, standing alone by the apartments across the street, staring straight at me. The moment he realized I was looking at him, his grin stretched wider, unnaturally wide, and it immediately made me uncomfortable. I ducked back inside and distracted myself by exploring the new place. The house was pretty spacious, way bigger than our last one, and I was excited when I picked my room. It had a huge window with a perfect view of the front yard. The only downside, anyone outside could easily see inside. My mom wasn't thrilled about that, but I begged her to let me keep that room. After a bit of back and forth, she finally caved. It was summer break, and my mom kept encouraging me to go outside, enjoy the sunshine, and maybe make a few friends in the neighborhood. After enough pestering, I gave in. I grabbed my baseball glove and headed outside to toss the ball around with my dad and younger brothers. While we were playing, I noticed the man from earlier standing across the street again. His name was still a mystery to me, but he was just standing there, watching. Despite how uneasy I felt before, I decided to be nice. My dad's the trusting type, always says you should give people the benefit of the doubt. So when I asked if it was okay to invite the guy over to play, he just shrugged and said, "Sure, why not?" I jogged across the street and introduced myself. The man said his name was Ryan. I asked if he wanted to join our game, and he smiled that same unsettling grin. "As long as you're playing, I'm in," he replied. We played baseball for a while, and honestly, it wasn't bad. He didn't seem as weird once we were all running around, laughing, and playing. Afterward, Ryan waved at me and headed back to his apartment. The next day, my parents and brothers went out to run errands and grab more boxes from storage. I wasn't in the mood to go, so I stayed home alone, unpacking the last of my things. While moving boxes into my room, I suddenly remembered I'd forgotten to lock the front door like my mom always reminded me to. I was just heading toward the living room when I heard the door open and close. My first instinct was to call out, thinking maybe my parents were back already. But something made me stop, a strange, sinking feeling in my stomach. I crept toward the hallway corner and peeked into the living room. It wasn't my parents. It was Ryan. He was inside my house and had just locked the door behind him. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I ran straight to my room and squeezed myself into the closet, barely daring to breathe. My heart pounded in my ears as I listened to his footsteps growing closer. I heard him enter my room, the sound of drawers opening, shuffling, clothes being tossed aside. When the footsteps moved away, I peeked out. My dresser drawers were wide open, and my underwear was scattered across the floor. The sight made my stomach turn. I tiptoed into the hallway, praying he wouldn't see me. I spotted him down the hall, opening the bathroom door, rummaging around in there for who knows what. The second the hallway was clear, I bolted. I sprinted through the front door, not even stopping to grab my shoes, and raced down the street to a nearby neighbor's house. My heart was pounding, my chest tight, and by the time I reached their porch, I was crying and barely able to get the words out. Thankfully, they were kind. They ushered me inside, locked the door, and called the police right away. The officers arrived not long after, searched the area, but Ryan was gone. To this day, I've never seen him again. And honestly, I hope it stays that way. When I was around 11 years old, my family lived in a quiet little neighborhood, and right across the street from us was this woman who, well, let's just say she was different. She had long, jet black hair that hung down her back, skin so pale it almost looked like she never saw sunlight, and the creepiest part, she rarely ever left her house. Everyone on our street called her the Vampire Lady. We never actually knew her real name. She barely spoke to anyone. But whenever someone walked by her place, you'd feel her eyes on you, watching from the window or front porch. Her house was always dark inside, even during the day. At night, it looked completely abandoned, except for the strange flickering lights we sometimes saw coming from the windows. My mom and my older brother would joke that it looked like something straight out of a horror movie, the kind where a mad scientist brings a monster to life. One weekend, my best friend Emily came over for a sleepover. Of course, I couldn't resist telling her about the weird lady across the street. Emily, being way braver than me, or maybe just more curious, thought it would be fun to sneak over and check out the house once everyone was asleep. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I agreed anyway. Part of me didn't want her to think I was scared. We waited until the house was quiet and my mom was asleep. She's a light sleeper, so we had to be super careful sneaking out. Once outside, the street was dark and empty. The only sound was the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. We crept across the street toward the Vampire Lady's house, staying as quiet as possible. Emily tiptoed up to one of the windows, trying to peek inside. I stayed a few steps behind, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, she grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "Come on, now," she whispered urgently. "What? We just got here. What's wrong?" I asked, confused as she pulled me away from the house. She didn't say a word until we were safely back inside my bedroom with the door locked. Only then did she finally explain. "When I looked through the window, I saw a camera," she said quietly. "There was this little red blinking light, like it was recording." The hairs on my arms stood up. I suggested we just go to bed and talk about it in the morning, trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. I really wish that was where the story ended. But it wasn't. Around 3 a.m., Emily and I were still tossing and turning, struggling to fall asleep, when suddenly Emily let out a terrified scream. I jumped out of bed, climbing up to the top bunk where she was. That's when I saw it. The same camera lens, that small, round, glassy eye pointed straight at our bedroom window. Someone was outside, watching us. In a panic, I screamed for my mom. Within seconds, she and my brothers rushed into the room, flipping the lights on. Whoever was outside must have bolted the moment they saw the lights, because by the time my mom grabbed the baseball bat from my brother's room and ran outside, the street was empty. We told her everything we knew, or more accurately, everything we saw. But we couldn't describe the person behind the camera. All we saw was the lens, cold, unblinking, pointed right at us. Still, deep down, Emily and I both had the same feeling. It was her, the woman from across the street. We didn't have proof, but that didn't matter. After that night, my mom made it clear we weren't allowed anywhere near that house again. It's been years since that happened, but I still get chills thinking about it. Some nights, I even have nightmares, seeing that dark, blinking lens staring at me from the window. And every time I do, I wonder what might have happened if we hadn't locked the door that night. A few years back, I decided to take a solo backpacking trip across France. I was 22 at the time, traveling alone, just exploring the country. One of the places I was most excited to visit was the Palace of Versailles, so I set aside a full day for it, taking a short train ride from Paris to get there. To make the trip, I had to use 2 different train lines, one to get to Versailles and another to get back to the city. The day itself was great. I spent hours wandering through the palace gardens, completely losing track of time. But by the time I was heading back, my phone battery was dangerously low, only about 3% left. I switched it to airplane mode and low power mode, hoping it would last long enough for emergencies. While riding the train back to Paris, I had my headphones on, not listening to anything, just wearing them so people wouldn't bother me. After a long day on my feet, I wasn't in the mood for conversation. That's when a random guy, let's call him Alex, sat down next to me. I wasn't interested in talking, so I acted like I didn't speak French, hoping he'd lose interest. But Alex wasn't giving up so easily. He pulled out his phone and opened Google Translate, typing out a message asking if I wanted to learn French. I politely typed back, "No, thank you," and put my headphones back on, clearly signaling I wasn't looking to chat. But he kept at it. The next message he typed was, "Where are you staying?" That set off alarms in my head. I didn't want to tell him my real plans, so I made something up. Told him I was staying at a big hotel with my family and that I was heading back to meet them. But Alex wasn't done. He asked which stop I was getting off at. Again, I lied, naming a random stop I wasn't actually using. That's when he smiled and said he'd come with me. At that point, my polite act ended. I told him firmly no and turned away, putting my headphones back on, making it clear the conversation was over. Thankfully, he finally stopped for a moment. A few minutes later, he answered a call on his phone, speaking in French, but I understood enough to catch what he said. "I'll get off at stop X. You head to stop Y." That made my stomach drop. Stop Y was exactly where I actually planned to get off, the stop near my hostel. Panic set in. When we reached the transfer station, Alex stood up and left the train, waiting by the doors. I purposely stalled, gathering my things slowly, adjusting my bag, taking my sweet time, anything to avoid getting off the train at the same moment as him. Once I was sure he had left to catch his next train, I finally got off, but I switched things up. I boarded the next train at the front car, kept my eyes peeled, and scanned every person around me, trying to stay aware of anyone watching me too closely. I probably looked paranoid, but I didn't care. When we reached stop X, I paid close attention to the people on the platform. No sign of Alex. But at stop Y, I got off with the crowd, cautiously looking around. As I turned the corner to leave the station, there he was. Alex, along with 4 other guys, casually hanging around, their eyes scanning the people exiting the platform. My heart skipped. Without hesitation, I turned right back around, slipping into the crowd, walking in the opposite direction. I let my hair down from the bun I'd been wearing, trying to change my appearance just enough. Once I was back above ground, I didn't stop. I hurried all the way back to my hostel, ducking into side streets, constantly checking behind me. For the next few days, I barely left the hostel unless one of my roommates came with me. It was a terrifying reminder that solo travel can be amazing, but you always have to trust your instincts. I'm just glad I listened to mine that day. My very first job was at this tiny, family-run pizza shop in the small town where I grew up. It's one of those places where everybody knows everybody, with barely over 1,000 people living there. We were right off the highway, and it took around half an hour to get to the nearest big city. One evening, sometime in late September or early October, I was working a quiet closing shift with two other coworkers and our manager. Business had been slow all day, hardly any customers. By around 9 p.m., we were cleaning up and getting ready to lock up when two men walked in with a little girl, maybe around 7 or 8 years old. I approached the front counter, expecting them to order something, but the shorter of the two men explained they were just passing through town. He started asking about menu prices and casually slipped in a question about what time we closed. I answered politely, told him our closing hours, and he simply nodded, walking over to sit down at one of the booths with the little girl. Meanwhile, the taller man stepped outside, heading toward their car parked just in front of the restaurant. From where I stood behind the counter, I could see him pacing around, glancing up and down the street, almost like he was waiting or watching for something. Inside, the little girl seemed cheerful, flipping through the menu and pointing at pictures like any kid would. About 5 minutes later, the shorter man leaned down, whispered something to her, and headed out the door. My coworkers and I exchanged uneasy glances. The whole situation just felt off. The girl stayed behind, spinning around to the soft music playing in the background, dancing by herself. I decided to walk over and ask if she was hungry or wanted something to drink. She smiled and simply asked for a cup of water. I filled a cup for her and brought it back to the booth. That's when I gently asked, "Who are you waiting for?" "My dad," she replied, still smiling. The uneasy feeling in the room only grew. Both men were gone, and it was now 9:20 p.m. The place was nearly empty except for us, and something about her answer didn't sit right. Our manager, noticing our concern, decided it was time to act. She called the police to report the situation. But in our small town, we don't even have our own police department. The closest officers had to come from a neighboring town, at least a 15-minute drive away. I stayed with the girl, sitting at the booth, trying to keep things calm. We chatted about random things to distract her while we waited for help to arrive. Suddenly, she stood up abruptly. "I have to go," she announced. We tried to explain gently that she should stay inside where it was safe until her dad came back, but she immediately became upset, crying, yelling, insisting she had to leave. Despite our efforts, she managed to bolt out the door. Later, we found out that the police spotted her walking alone down the side of the highway that night. We never learned exactly what happened after that, but I can only hope she's safe now. 3 years later, my wife and I bought our first home, a beautiful place in the nicer part of the city. We picked a spot close to my mom's house. Since my dad passed away, she's been living alone, and with her health issues, I always wanted to be nearby. See, my mom was born in South Africa before polio vaccines were common, and the illness left her unable to use her legs. She spent her life relying on crutches or a wheelchair. She's incredibly independent, but I always worried about something happening to her. So it brought me peace of mind living nearby, knowing I could help anytime. But during the summer of 2019, something happened I never expected. My mom had planned a trip back to South Africa to visit her sister and my cousins. With my older brother living hours away, I volunteered to look after her house while she was gone. I'd visit twice a week, watering her plants, collecting mail, checking her answering machine, the usual. Thankfully, the year before, I convinced her to let me install a security system in her house. It gave me peace of mind. Sensors on the doors and windows, alerts sent straight to my phone, everything but cameras, which I regret not adding sooner. At my own house, I have cameras everywhere. Inside, outside, even in the garage. About a month into her trip, everything was business as usual. I'd finished work, hit the gym, relaxed with my wife, and gone to bed. Around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by my phone buzzing. Half asleep, I ignored it, thinking it was some late-night email or social media notification. But the buzzing didn't stop. Annoyed, my wife nudged me. "Turn that off." "I'm trying to sleep," she mumbled. I'm glad I didn't. When I finally looked at my phone, my stomach dropped. There were multiple alerts from the security system at my mom's house. Motion detected in the basement. Repeated triggers. Right then, the security company called me. The woman on the line confirmed that their system had picked up movement in the basement. They'd dispatched a security guard to check the property. I jumped out of bed, adrenaline kicking in, fumbling for my shoes and car keys. Luckily, I always keep a powerful flashlight in my car for nighttime adventures. It now served a much more serious purpose. I sped to my mom's house, heart racing, mind spiraling through worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, the house looked untouched, dark and silent, exactly how I left it. But the alarm blared from inside, echoing across the quiet neighborhood. Curious neighbors peeked out from their windows and porches. Strangely, no sign of the security patrol yet. I unlocked the front door remotely and cautiously stepped inside. Fear rooted me to the floor. I'm not ashamed to admit I froze for a second, staring into the pitch-black entryway. Even though I logically knew my mom was safe, enjoying the beach with my aunt, my protective instincts still convinced me she might be in danger. Slowly, I crept through the house, flashlight in hand. I headed straight for the basement, flipping the lights on, expecting, well, I'm not sure what I expected, but there was nothing. No sign of forced entry. The motion detector lights blinked at me, my phone buzzing with fresh alerts, all triggered by me moving around now. Standing there, exposed in the basement, I realized how dumb it was to just stand out in the open, so I bolted upstairs, grabbing the biggest kitchen knife I could find. Room by room, I searched the main floor, closets, under furniture, everywhere. Everything looked normal, but then I noticed the guest bedroom door, closed. I didn't remember shutting it. Heart pounding, I approached carefully, straining to hear any noise. Hand trembling, I flung the door open, expecting the worst, and nearly fainted when I saw myself. My reflection stared back at me from mirrored closet doors. In my panic, the dark room had made my own reflection look like a shadowy figure holding a weapon. Outside, I finally heard a car door shut. The so-called security guard had arrived nearly an hour after the call. The guy looked younger than me, slightly out of shape with a friendly face. Not exactly intimidating. Embarrassed, I explained I'd already searched the house. But when he asked, "Did you check the garage?" my blood ran cold. I opened the garage remotely and peeked around. Nothing. After signing some paperwork confirming he'd shown up, the guard casually mentioned something that sent another shiver down my spine. Their motion detectors didn't just sense movement. They also detected changes in body heat. I locked up the house, reactivated the alarm, and leaned against my car, staring at the dark house, unsettled. I don't know if it was a malfunction, or if someone was really there. But the next day, I didn't waste time. I installed cameras everywhere in my mom's house. It's been 2 years since that night. I've never told my mom, brother, or even my wife the full story. Sometimes not knowing the truth feels safer. Because the alternative, that's the part that still keeps me up at night. I met this man while I was still in a relationship with my boyfriend. He was significantly older than me, probably around 10 years if my memory serves me right, but I was never interested in him. To be honest, I didn't find him attractive in the slightest. Our interaction was brief, maybe 20 minutes total, and entirely surface level. It was the kind of polite, impersonal small talk you'd have with a stranger when you absolutely have to. I never gave him any reason to think I wanted more than that. Eventually, my boyfriend and I made our relationship public. Somehow that man found out. I never told him, so how he discovered it is still beyond me. One night, my boyfriend and I were heading out to a club, excited for a fun evening. That's when I noticed him, the same guy, following us. As soon as I saw him, my nerves kicked in. I grabbed my friend, and we slipped off to the bathroom to avoid him, while my boyfriend turned around and confronted him. But instead of acting his age, the guy had a full meltdown. He literally started crying, like a little kid throwing a tantrum, and then stormed out of the club. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. A few weeks later, I found a disturbing letter in my mailbox. A love letter from him. The worst part? He delivered it himself. That meant he had followed me home before, figured out where I lived, and stood at my door without me even knowing. A year went by, and I completely stopped visiting the place where I had first met him. It wasn't even worth the risk, especially since my friends told me he practically lived there now. They'd see him hanging around almost every day, like he was waiting for me to show up. Eventually, my boyfriend and I moved to a different neighborhood, hoping to leave the situation behind. But that summer, I started seeing him again, this time at the mall near our new place. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence. But then, a shop owner I know well pulled me aside, visibly concerned. He told me that the man had been following me through the mall, even hiding whenever I turned around to check my surroundings. That was when I knew this wasn't some random encounter. He was actively watching me. I ended up telling the shop owner the whole story. He was alarmed too and promised to spread the word to other store owners. He even assured me that if he spotted the man lurking around again, he wouldn't hesitate to contact mall security. And that's how I ended up with what I now call my first professional level stalker. It's been over 2 years since this whole thing started, and my boyfriend and I still feel completely lost about what to do. My family is just as concerned, but unfortunately, we've learned the hard way that unless the guy physically harms me, the police can't do much. It's terrifying knowing someone like that is out there, watching, waiting. I desperately need a job, but I refuse to work as a waitress anywhere near the city center, especially near the place I met him, because I know he'd find out where I work and sit there all day, just watching. Even everyday things like going to the mall alone, completely off limits for me now. I only go if my boyfriend is with me. There are entire cafes, stores, and supermarkets I avoid because I know he hangs out there regularly, hoping to catch a glimpse of me. What makes it worse is how unbalanced it all feels. He knows my full name. He knows where I live, where I work, possibly even more. Meanwhile, I only know his first name and his face. It terrifies me to think about the future. I'm almost done with university, and once I apply for a teaching position, all my personal information, my full name, workplace, goes online. It feels like I'll be handing him a roadmap straight to me. I honestly wish I could pack up and leave the city altogether. But it's not that simple. Even if I move, what's stopping him from finding me again? With just my name, it wouldn't be hard. That thought alone keeps me up at night. Thank you for sticking with me until the end of my story. If you've ever had similar unsettling or creepy experiences, whether it's being followed, stalked, or just a strange encounter, feel free to share them. You're not alone. When I was 19, I worked at a small shopping mall in the quiet little town where I grew up. Nothing much ever happened there. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and serious crime was practically unheard of. But just a short 15-minute drive away, there was a nearby city that had a very different reputation. It was known for having one of the highest crime rates in the country, especially when it came to violent crimes. Still, that always felt distant to me. Our town and the mall I worked at felt safe, like our own little bubble. The mall itself was nothing fancy, just a modest shopping center where families, retirees, and teenagers like me would spend time. It wasn't the kind of place where you expected anything sketchy to happen. One afternoon, during my break, I headed over to the food court like I always did. I grabbed a drink, sat down at one of the small tables, and started scrolling through my phone, just passing the time before I had to get back to work. That's when I noticed them, two women walking toward me. My first thought was that they had spotted my work uniform and maybe wanted to ask about something we sold at my store. It wasn't unusual for that to happen, so I didn't think twice. The women sat down at my table, uninvited, but they smiled politely. Both of them were dressed quite formally, the kind of clothes you'd wear to church or some fancy event. Their appearance was neat, put together, and at first glance, nothing about them seemed suspicious. They spoke with strong accents, though I couldn't place where they were from. I just assumed they were new to town or maybe visitors. Then one of them pulled out a book, some kind of religious text, and they started asking me questions. "Do you go to church? Do you believe in God?" They kept their tone friendly, but the questions made me a little uncomfortable. I figured they were part of some religious group, maybe missionaries or volunteers spreading their message. I was shy by nature, so I didn't say much, just nodded along, listening quietly. I didn't want to be rude, and honestly, I wasn't sure how to end the conversation. A few minutes in, they invited me to a youth group they were hosting that evening. The invite caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that kind of offer while sitting at the mall during my break. I politely explained that I was working and couldn't go anywhere. I was just on a short break before my next shift, but they kept pushing. They asked again, insisting it would be fun, saying I should come along. I had to repeat several times that I couldn't join them. Eventually, they seemed to get the hint, but before leaving, they asked for my phone number. They said they wanted to text me details about their next gathering. I didn't like the idea, but I also didn't want to seem rude or cause a scene. So, feeling a little uneasy, I gave them my number just to get the conversation over with. A couple of days later, I got a message from them. It was an invitation to another youth group event. I felt trapped. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want to be mean or confrontational. I debated what to do. After a moment of hesitation, I decided to block the number. It wasn't that I thought they were dangerous. I just didn't want to be involved with their group, and blocking them seemed like the easiest way to avoid any more awkward conversations. I moved on and honestly didn't think much of it. Until a few months later, I was reading a news article that sent a chill down my spine. There was a warning for young women in our area about a suspected human trafficking operation. The report described a tactic being used: women approaching girls in public places, striking up friendly conversations about religion, specifically mentioning God the Mother, and trying to lure them away. The more I read, the more I realized that's exactly what happened to me. Suddenly, I felt this overwhelming wave of relief. If I had been off that day instead of working, if I had agreed to leave with them, who knows what could have happened. I was thankful that I had trusted my gut, even if at the time I didn't think it was a big deal. Blocking that number, keeping my distance, such small choices, but looking back, they might have kept me safe from something far more dangerous than I ever imagined.